Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and have you used a CGM before? CGM is continuous glucose monitor, and there's different options out there. Ideally, you can get it from your doctor, but they seem to just want to wait until you're type 2 diabetic and not be preventative. I would like us to take ownership of our health and make choices now to prevent having high, low glucose readings and optimize your health from the inside out by testing and not guessing. And that includes a CGM that goes on for 14 days, and you can order one via NutriSense. And a CGM is giving you glucose updates with a small device in the back of your arm 24/7. Totally easy. I actually did a video on my YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete, how to apply this CGM. First time, kind of scared, but it doesn't hurt. But it gives you real-time glucose readings. Glucose response to meals. You'll learn about what foods are reactive to you, and that could be a healthy food that you think is great, but it could raise your glucose. Simple things as stevia, for me, raise my glucose. Chewing gum, raise my glucose. Stress, when I'm driving a car and there's traffic, raises my glucose. Every stress response is a glucose response. So learn how to manage your stress. Learn how to pick right foods for you, unless you can, do other lab testing and figure out Vibrant Wellness food zoomers, but it's kind of expensive for people. So if you can wear a CGM, it's a great way to learn about stress, food, exercise, stacking movement with your nutrition. Figure out how to balance your blood sugar. So we want to learn more about how to exercise and eat or not eat. And morning cortisol, does it raise your glucose? If there's hidden stressors at nighttime, does your glucose go up higher while you're sleeping? So it gives us lots of clues that we can put in our investigation when we are working on your personalized fueling, training, and performance program to improve fat loss, performance, and longevity. So head to NutriSense website, nutrisense.io, how it works. You can learn more about your habits, your routines, your relationship to food, a little bit more. Great app to use, and it can sync on to different programs. So you can put it all together. So if you want to get started with your journey in NutriSense, I suggest this to all my clients. Use at least 30 days. So you can do a 30-day, 90-day, different programs, but you can pick which one you want. You get the sensor in the mail, put it on, lasts for 14 days, sync it to the app, and get your readings on there. And then if you're doing my VIP coaching program, I'm working with you to correlate this data together. So begin your health optimization journey with NutriSense, and you can save on your order with our code, as usual, Low Carb Athlete. So no carbs is not our goal, it's carb timing, and using NutriSense, you can help figure out your nutrient-dense whole food plan and when to adjust your macros based on your exercise intensity, duration, based on your life stressors, and learn more. So it's nice to have this data. So test and not guess with NutriSense. Let me know how you like it. All right. I have Dave Feldman finally on my show after I've been bugging him since our low carb cruise. I need to get this information out to our athletes because we think we're fit and healthy, but it's not always from the inside out, and why we need to test, not guess, and why we need not to be afraid to eat meat and butter and think that cholesterol is going to cause heart disease. We're all going to die because we're eating butter, steak, and saturated fats. So we've got the expert who's Mr. Researcher on cholesterol, Dave Feldman. Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Debbie.
Well, let's just dive into it about your why. Why are you so into cholesterol and researching it?
Well, ultimately what it came around to is I gone on a low carb ketogenic diet in April of 2015. And that actually inspired both my dad and my sister to go on it as well. And we were all concerned about the possibility that our cholesterol would rise, although I myself didn't know for sure either way. And they had gotten their blood work first about 6 months in, and their cholesterol hardly budged at all, which gave me some comfort. But then I got mine about a month after theirs, and my cholesterol had shot through the roof. And so I became quite obsessed with this because I kept thinking, wait a sec, why would my first degree family members see this increase in cholesterol, but I wouldn't? And then I started learning everything that I could about the field around cholesterol called lipidology, ology being the study, lipids. And I'm not a formally trained biochemist, but as a software engineer, I saw that the system that moves cholesterol around in the body is a lot like a network. And that's kind of what sparked my obsession, along with, of course, a healthy dose of fear. I was, of course, concerned that this was going to result in me getting a heart attack someday. So I wanted to understand everything I could about it. And for that matter, whether I should abandon the diet.
Yeah. So keto and more so keto, carnivore, animal-based diet is a lot of people are talking about now. But keto itself is, say, 70% fat to 80% fat and 20% protein, carbs, depending on what program you're following. But cholesterol is the big fear of people. As I said, I just talked to someone last week, afraid their client was going to get heart disease because they're eating a carnivore diet. And a lot of people doing a high fat diet, low carb. It is a fear, but so what have you found that we need to, should we worry about cholesterol? Because as I said, it's a constant fear and it's really not changing, but let's talk about what is cholesterol, because I keep talking about this too. So let you take over. What is cholesterol anyways? Because that's confusing.
So cholesterol is a sterol. It's a compound found in every single cell of our bodies. It actually, it's a molecule that adds a lot of structural integrity to the bilayers that form our cells, as well as in a lot of the organelles that are in our cells. It's also a precursor to many sex hormones, and it's also used commonly in the bile acids that we digest our food with. The bottom line is we're quite literally made of cholesterol. In fact, the brain itself is about a quarter, I believe, of its weight is cholesterol. It's used a lot in the nervous system and so forth. There's just all kinds of aspects that are relevant. But what is important to understand is that for reasons that we may be getting into, the body seems to have a need to mobilize and transport this cholesterol around within the bloodstream. And when it does it in these complexes, typically called lipoprotein. You could think of them as a composition of lipids and proteins together in these complexes, lipoproteins. That L that begins with lipoprotein is actually what you are talking about when you talk about LDL cholesterol. It's low density lipoprotein cholesterol, or rather the cholesterol found on low density lipoproteins, as well as the so-called good cholesterol, HDL, or rather the cholesterol found on high density lipoproteins, HDL. So this cholesterol, not only being foundational to the body, but also being in the bloodstream, is something that's a lot of interest to me in that network I described before, why it is that it gets moved around, but also why I became so obsessed with understanding why it happened when I did go low carb. Most of our studies for people who have high cholesterol, they tend to associate with cardiovascular disease when there's some dysfunction in their metabolizing of cholesterol, or for that matter, of lipids themselves. And so that's a lot of what I'm doing right now, is trying to answer that question you just asked, which is why we're doing a study out of UCLA right now on folks like myself, and probably like a lot of the clients you're describing, who otherwise seem metabolically healthy, but who likewise have high LDL cholesterol. We really don't have hardly any data on that at all. So my short answer is I can't answer yet as to whether we should worry. We have a lot of anecdotal data, but I don't want to speak too much on it until we have this prospective data that we're getting from this study on folks that have sky high LDL, but are otherwise metabolically healthy on a ketogenic diet.
So talk a little bit about that study. It's good where to add in what is metabolic health and what is this? What are you studying?
Yeah, so my short definition for metabolic health, I know we say it a lot, you hear it a lot in this space. I think of metabolic health is your body seems very successful at both putting away energy and taking it back out, and more specifically, fuel. So, for example, if you find somebody who, after they've fasted 12 hours, half a day, they still have a lot of fuel in their bloodstream. They have a lot of glucose, and they have a lot of those are fuel. The fuel predominantly from carbs, the second being fuel predominantly from fat. You've got to ask why. Why is there a lot of fuel buildup in their bloodstream? And generally speaking, it's because there's some kind of dysfunction. And often it can be an acquired disease such as type 2 diabetes. And in short, there's a parking problem, right? The parking slots are full, to anthropomorphize this a little bit. And so because there's not a lot of places to park, then you end up with a lot more buildup. And that becomes kind of important when we get back to cholesterol, because you know how I mentioned these are complexes. These are like boats that include both cholesterol. They also include triglycerides. If there's a backup, if there's a whole lot of these triglycerides in the bloodstream, that necessarily means there's going to be more of these LDL ultimately in most cases. And I want to know how much of that association of the higher LDL is more due to that metabolic problem than it is due to the LDL itself. So that's why these folks that I'm describing who are metabolically healthy, they have the opposite. They actually have a detectably low level of triglycerides in the bloodstream, in spite of also having high LDL. And what I think is going on there, Debbie, and as part of my research, like with the model and so forth, is I think we've got the opposite. We've got a lot of parking spaces open, but we have a demand to traffic those triglycerides, that fuel. And so what we're really seeing is kind of like a lot of empty boats that have just gotten done delivering a lot of their triglyceride payload. And therefore, because there needed to be more trafficking, that's why we see more of them.
Very good description of the parking space as an analogy, because I think it gets confusing and too medical for people. It's overwhelming. I think that's maybe why a lot of people don't understand cholesterol and fear cholesterol, that relate having meat or an animal-based diet or high-fat diet, either way, that they're going to raise their cholesterol from that. So do we get higher cholesterol from eating high-fat foods, or what causes cholesterol if it is higher? Is it other elements, factors, lifestyle habits going to raise our cholesterol? Or is it just from the fear of eating fatty foods?
Well, that's a lot of what this model is. So I told you about when I first started becoming obsessed. Now, as of last year, we have this published. It's called the Lipid Energy Model. And it's helping to elucidate exactly what you described. I think most people right now who are listening would probably think, oh, it's just basically how much I'm consuming saturated fat. Saturated fat is associated with having high LDL. So probably those folks that I'm describing at UCLA, they're just having a lot of saturated fat, and their higher LDL is because of the higher amount of saturated fat. And I'm here to tell you that I think that's actually a component, but it's a much smaller component than you may realize. The three different factors that we think are highly relevant in those folks who are very low carb is A, the low carb itself. The lower carb you are, necessarily the higher fat trafficking you need to be. So you are going to be some level of fat powered by necessity, because you're either getting it from carbohydrates or from fat. The second one is how lean you are. This is a very important component, because folks who were on the diet originally, a lot of them were coming from, say, obesity or severe type 2 diabetes. They tended to have a BMI above 25. And that's why you didn't see a lot of these quote unquote hyper responders up until just recently, because keto, and for that matter, just a very low carb diet, it wasn't popular with lean athletic folks before now. And now, literally in just like the last 5 to 8 years, we see a lot of people coming up in this phenotype that's of interest to me and my research, which are lean mass hyperresponders. That's what we call them. It's because they tend, observationally, they tend to be leaner. And then lastly, there's the actual athleticism itself, especially cardio. So your heart, my heart, it runs all the fuel. It burns through quite a bit. But there's a lot of research that shows that in particular, those cardiomyocytes, the cells that make up the heart, for example, they love triglycerides that come off of these lipoproteins. So if you get somebody who's very low carb, who's very lean, and who's also very athletic, especially in a cardio fashion, they have a very high likelihood of being one of these lean mass hyperresponders. Now, on the other side of it, there are things that can lower LDL. For example, many people are on a keto diet that's high in fiber. That creates more demand for the bile acid sequestration that can be relevant. People who do more resistance, if you're doing a lot of bodybuilding, a lot of muscle building, I posit that there's a higher degree of, not to lose too many people on the geek talk, but something called endocytosis. Literally, your muscle cells, your skeletal muscle, are quite literally consuming more of those lipoproteins because they're made of the same thing that your cell bilayers are made of. So for muscle tissue growth and repair, you're quite literally just eating more of these lipoproteins directly. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's medication. You can also take meds that upregulate LDL receptor and so forth that can bring down your LDL levels. But getting back to the core of the argument making is dietary cholesterol and or saturated fat the predominant factor as to why these folks that are at the center of my research, seeing the high LDL levels they are, I would say they're probably less influential than the three levers I mentioned earlier.
So with the tests that you're doing at UCLA, what are you looking for to qualify to be in the study? So is there like certain specific numbers on body composition percentage? Do you have to be, what are the ranges or the qualifications to be in the study? You said a few of them, but specific.
The top line qualifications are your LDL needs to be 190 or, and that's to the guidelines, that's considered hypercholesterolemic by definition. In fact, you're supposed to be on the maximally dosed statin if you have an LDL of 190 or higher. But an HDL of 60 or higher and triglycerides of 80 or lower. And for our study, you have to present with having had lower LDL before you'd gone on a ketogenic diet. That way we know it's not genetically set to a higher point. So if I'm remembering it exactly, your LDL needed to be at, I believe, 130 or below and rise to 190 or whatever that rise is. It needs to be at least 50% or more. And so we got 100 participants that met this. There's additional criteria. You can't have, say, a prior diagnosis of diabetes or heart disease or anything along those lines. This is prospective data where we're intentionally going for folks who have low cardiovascular risk factors. But the study is that we're not just confirming that blood work. We're having everybody get what's known as a CT angiogram. CT angiogram captures both the calcified and non-calcified plaque in the coronary arteries. It's very high resolution, and it's arguably the most advanced non-invasive capture of the geography of these hearts. So you can get to soft plaque levels that are extremely small levels extremely small and granular. And we're getting 2 scans per participant. So they get one at day 0. They get another one roughly a year later at around 365. And that way we have comparisons so that we can see how much their plaque levels have increased over that span of time. And yeah, I actually just presented on the preliminary data for this, I want to say like 5-6 months ago, because we'd gotten all 100 scans in by that point. At least had some preliminary to see how that looked against the general population.
So is it looking good?
Well, to be fair, it's still, I'll caveat that's preliminary. I will say that the calcification at baseline is comparable to a low risk population, or rather a population with 0 risk factors per a study known as the CAC Consortium. So how does it look at first glance? Well, the average age for our population was around 55. I forget what the total cholesterol level was, but the LDL is around 260. So that's pretty high mean average. That's in the top 10% of the top 1% of the population. And they also had high HDL, low triglycerides. But naturally, I was very curious because the calcification would be kind of the first broad stroke test. And I wanted to see what that would look like. And indeed, we do have some folks with, say a calcification that's considered on the more concerning level. I want to say we had like 3, maybe 4. But if you randomly grabbed 100 folks who were in the 0 risk factor category in general, who were asymptomatic, they didn't show any signs of heart disease or so forth, you're going to have about, according to the CAC Consortium, about 5 or 6% at that level. So technically we were lower in that stratification of high risk. But on top of that, we were comparable in that most of these folks, even though the mean age was 55, most of them had a 0 CAC. So that's at the other end of the spectrum, and that's the majority of them, which is kind of important because the average time that they had been at these levels was 4.4 years. So that prelim data does look exciting. It does look encouraging. But again, I'll give that normal caveat. It is still preliminary. We still haven't done a more granular match, which we intend to do with another study called the Miami Heart study, which is getting also CT angiograms, not just coronary artery calcification.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners would fit into that category. 55 and older, his average age is 55, but just the LDL. Because that's when I hear so many people come to me wanting to do my health investigation program, coaching athletes, looking at the labs, investigating, are you healthy from the inside out? But a lot of people switch to a higher fat, low carb diet, and they get these numbers and get afraid and think they need to go to a plant-based diet and be vegetarian because they're going to get heart disease and die because they're eating all this saturated fat. So it's confusing for sure. So it's great what you're doing. Anything on the LDL, the particle size? Because we used to always talk about, looking at LDL is high, but what is the particle size? So is there any breakdown of the type LDL that we should look at?
This is one of those places where it becomes challenging for me because I know this is where I'm going to sound even at odds with a lot of people inside of keto. I'm not as interested in the quote unquote small, dense versus big, fluffy discussion. The reason being is because I still very much believe that the lipid profile, that stratification of what those lipids look like, are very much more the result of rather than the actor. So they're more the consequence than the cause. And the smaller dense LDL, the higher proportion that tends to associate with those folks who do have who are metabolically challenged, who have, for example, type 2 diabetes and so forth. If you have high triglycerides, for example, it's more likely than not that you have a higher preponderance of small, dense LDL particles. And there's many possible reasons for this. But again, kind of getting back to the parking issue, what you tend to find is as those complexes, they start out triglyceride rich and cholesterol poor. And you could say it's their job to start out big and to get small, these ApoB containing lipoproteins. Start out big. What are they mainly letting go of? They're mainly letting go of that triglyceride cargo, the fuel, especially if you're powered by fat. And as they're letting it go, these particles normally become cholesterol rich and triglyceride poor. They've mainly let go of their triglyceride cargo proportionally. Those folks, these studies that show small, dense LDL particles, they tend to have a high amount of triglycerides per LDL particle compared to people who are metabolically healthy. So one of the key pieces of information I'm interested in are these folks that are at the middle of our study. How many of them are going to show a profile that is going to be cholesterol rich and triglyceride poor for those small LDL particles, even when they're the same size as those who, say, have type 2 diabetes? The reason I'm drilling in on this is because if you think of these things as kind of having a manifest, if you will, right? Like the boat has a manifest of what's been going on. Mm-hmm. You're going to find that those in the type 2 diabetics, they've had to do a lot more rearranging of the cargo. You can almost call it, moving the deck chairs between each other through a protein called cholesterol ester transfer protein. You don't need to remember that. You just need to remember this. They're exchanging lipids between each other more inside the bloodstream because they're not succeeding at delivering it. And that's creating these different types of lipoproteins that they're seeing this association with. That's my hypothesis. And that's why when you look at a healthy person, whatever diet they're on, the composition of those lipoproteins says a lot about what's going on that resulted in them. Mm. So it's very instructive to see what a boat's status is at the end of its journey. But the problem is, if all you can do is see the boats from a distance, then you can create associations and assume that those associations are causal. Mm-hmm. And I push back on that. I don't think that's what's happening. Rather, I think that we're seeing these associations of small, dense LDL particles, and there's more of these kinetic assumptions where it's like, oh, so they must be able to fit more into, the arterial wall or through gap junctions or things like that. And the engineer in me is like, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. Why would small, dense LDL particles associate more with atherosclerosis, but the big fluffy LDL doesn't? But then one size up, VLDL, associates more with atherosclerosis. It doesn't seem to be a size gradient, or else it wouldn't look this way. So that's why I'm drilling into it a bit more, is because until we have a study like this study, until we can actually dig in and be like, now, wait a sec. For example, I know a lean mass hyperresponder who has small LDL, as in it's the small stratification that's at 22.5 nanometers. I know I'm getting a little geeky, but I'm gonna summarize this in a second. In absolute numbers, he has very high levels of quote unquote small LDL particles. I make that distinction because as a percentage, that's actually a small percentage. It's like 25% of his total LDL particles. Now, I think the composition of those small LDL particles is going to show that they're triglyceride poor and cholesterol rich, suggesting that he's just trafficking more of these total particles such that they convert faster and leave a total larger number of the absolute number, but that the proportions still look similar to if you were on a carb-centric diet. The proportions will be about the same, and that the percentage of small LDL particles would actually be much lower. That the total amount would be much lower, but the proportions would probably be comparable. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm communicating this well, but
yeah,
the gist of it is we should be looking more at the proportions. It's just we didn't have a reason to until there was the rise of the ketogenic diet, because people were typically on mixed diets. And so those were the associations we saw. We didn't yet have a point in time like we do now, which I think is exciting, of people who are choosing to be on a metabolic pathway of being fat adapted while also being health conscious. It creates this new engineered system that I think may be physiological, but I'll always caveat that I don't know for sure until we get this data.
How long are you doing the study for?
It's for 1 year, but the recruitment period took a little more than a year. So we'll have all of the data in this coming February. And at that point, then we could do our final analysis. But of course, be aware that publication is
another 5 years.
Yeah, I hope not. But I've stopped trying to make estimates against timing on these things. Yeah. It's very difficult.
So did you read Nina's book, The Big Fat Surprise, before you got into all this, or as you got into it? Because that was a part of our book requirement as nutritional therapy practitioner school that just was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. The history of the whole cholesterol, heart disease connection. Just, she went so deep.
Yeah, I did. I actually read it as I was getting into the ketogenic diet and before I got my cholesterol numbers. So I was very interested. I was very curious.
Mm-hmm. So if anyone has not read that and you're afraid of the whole cholesterol thing, just read her book. It's like 500 pages of the whole research behind all of this. And then I'm reading Dr. Elizabeth Bright. She was on my podcast 2 times now. We've had an interview about menopause and the history of that. And it's similar, but smaller scale, that the whole menopause research of thousands of years of all the pharmaceutical, again, companies, their influence, and how these words that we use in fear into people that isn't always necessary. That we need that.
There is a challenge. There is a challenge with that because I don't, I want to be as even-handed as I can with all parties involved. Yeah. But there's no denying, and this isn't just coming from me. You can find plenty of published researchers who will state this overtly. There's no denying the fact that there's a challenge in conducting research that doesn't have an interest towards something monetizable, some kind of, business angle. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing if indeed it's making people better. It's healing and it's helping people. And without question, there's a lot of life-saving measures that have come from all these industries, especially pharma. But at the same time, I think that a lot of what we absolutely have to fix is this process of discovering in paradigms that could be disruptive towards an underlying business model to that entire field. That's a challenge because, of course, you're going to have a lot of senior members of that field that are I don't know that it's necessarily overt wrongdoing as much as it could just be natural motivating reasoning, which all of us do to some extent, right? Yeah. But I would hope that we get better at our processes around this emergence of discovery that can be disruptive to these industries, but rightly so, because it may be a necessary action, right? We may be doing more harm than good in our efforts to do better, predominantly because the system that gets us to these discoveries may not be the most effective as it could be to accomplish that.
Yeah, I always have to look at who's the study done by and who's it for and who's in the study too. But going back to cholesterol, I know so many people, as a personal trainer for 25, well, more than that, I'm getting older. I always say 25 years, but more than that, statin drugs are always given to people. Have you gotten into the research in high cholesterol and statin drugs at all? Is that part of your curiosity when you were getting into this, medicating?
It kind of was at first, but the challenge is the way this is just true of all pharmaceuticals. There's a kind of survival of the fittest of the drug that works versus the drug that doesn't. So when you're doing a meta-analysis of all drugs for a given ailment, you have to recognize that there's some unknown number of drug trials that have succeeded at changing numbers associated with that ailment that they're attacking, that you may not be able to figure into the larger meta-analysis. So for example, if a drug succeeds at lowering LDL, but increases mortality such that the drug is not released at all, doesn't go to market, or for that matter, it does go to market, but surveillance data suggests it should be pulled back, that's considered a failed drug trial. But the data that the LDL was lowered and not necessarily as efficacious, that doesn't end up in these larger meta-analyses. And again, this isn't to suggest that the meta-analyses themselves are fundamentally flawed, because we don't know what we don't know. But it is the reason why I don't find that data to be quite as interesting. That, alongside the fact that drugs that lower LDL have varying levels of outcome, which already to me says, because you already have drugs that are doing multiple things, not just the one thing, you have to account for how much that could be relevant to the overall effect. So, for example, in the case of statins, they're known for being anti-inflammatory, and there's a lot of speculation as to whether the reduction in cardiovascular disease has more to do with the anti-inflammation than it does with the LDL lowering. And I can't speak to that too much, other than just to say that there's a lot of published information on that. But that is a challenge to me, because I do believe cardiovascular disease should be looked at through the inflammatory lens, because I think that's highly relevant. I definitely think, and it's now well acknowledged, that atherosclerosis is an inflammatory disease. The key debate, I think, right now is whether or not the retention of LDL particles induces that inflammatory cascade, or whether the inflammatory cascade results in the higher recruitment of LDL particles. And there's a lot of new research on that, particularly with transcytosis, that shows that indeed there's greater transcytosis. Sorry, another technical term. Trans being transport, cytosis being related to the cell.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is there's greater capture of LDL particles from the bloodstream by these cells that line our vessel walls, called endothelial cells. The whole thing's an endothelium, that transport LDL particles into the subintimal space. And I think, but this is a hypothesis, I think that that's highly relevant, because it could further suggest that LDL particles are actually recruited to sites of inflammation as part of the immune response, which to me makes sense, because they have, for example, alpha tocopherol, which is an antioxidant. They bind to pathogens. I think that they're used in tandem with macrophages. But again, my usual caveat, I'm doing a talk on this right now with transcytosis, and particularly the relevance of inflammation as it associates with it. But the problem is, it's just difficult to see the initiation in vivo. Like, you can't just put a little microscopic camera at, bifurcation and wait a couple decades until you manage to catch it in the act and know for sure. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah. Someday I'm sure someone will do that. Newborns are being filled with cameras and tracking. So with people scared of cardiovascular disease, is it possible to, look at ownership of our health and be preventative, that, okay, I don't want to die of cardiovascular disease. What should I do?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no substitute for the actual detection of the disease itself. I say this to family members, and while I'll caveat this isn't medical advice, I'll just tell you what I tell my family members, which is, if you are at any reasonable risk of cardiovascular disease, one of the first things you should consider is a CAC, coronary artery calcification test. It's unlike the CT angiogram, it doesn't require any contrast dye. It's usually something you can pay for out of pocket. I've seen them go for as little as $50 up to $300. But if you go and you get that done, depending on your age and depending on your prior lifestyle, like if you've had kind of not the best diet through your life, you've not been too healthy, don't be surprised if you get a score above 0. But many people watching this now will potentially have a score of 0. That will tell you a lot. That means there's no calcification in your coronary arteries. And so there's probably not advanced disease. Again, just speaking in probabilities. There's also a lot of research that's been released in just literally the last 3-4 years that have really further solidified why CAC should just be an existing care. I think for me personally, from 40 and up, I'm just going to be getting CACs. And even if I get a 0, I'll probably test, every 5 years. But it's just such a powerful test to pick up. Now, what critics will say, rightly, is that it picks up calcification, but it doesn't pick up soft plaque. And it is possible that you could have a lot of soft plaque while still having a CAC of 0. That said, again, getting back to this recent research, there have been studies like the one out of Denmark, which had 23,000 participants who were symptomatic. So they were referred because they had some kind of chest pain or something like that. And what they found was that actually CAC was remarkably correlative with non-calcified plaque. So generally speaking, depending on how high your score was, it tended to be highly associated with how high your non-calcified plaque levels would be. But on top of that, it was extremely rare to find a high level of occlusion. That's like the pinch, if you will, of say 50% or higher in somebody even symptomatic who had a CAC of 0. I think it was like 0.4%. So about 1 in 250 people who had a CAC of 0 actually had an occlusion of at least 50% or more somewhere. So it's a pretty prognostic tool, relatively speaking. Now, that said, you can go to, again, what I think is the gold standard. You can get a CT angiogram. I find I can negotiate some for myself and family members for somewhere between 500 and 1,000. There is a little more risk in that you get a little more radiation exposure and you've got contrast eye, but the radiation exposures come way down from where it used to be, such that I've already had it twice. I'll probably have a third one in a couple years. And it's just, now you get both the calcification and the soft plaque. But there's that, nothing beats literally looking at the disease itself. Like if you're worried about heart disease, go look.
Yeah.
It's beautiful that we're in a day and age where you can just check yourself directly.
Yeah, I know. So ideally get the CAC should be part of our annual checkup. And then every, 3 years to 5 years?
Annual, not like every year. Cause the radiation dosage is comparable to that of a mammogram, like a little bit more than a mammogram. I think it's like 0.6 millisieverts. But I am, again, trying not to sound advisory in any way.
Yes,
but I think because of just how low dose it is, I could see us getting to a point where we're just doing it more often with people who are like 40 at like their 40th, birthday or around thereabouts. And unless, of course, you have higher risk factors before that point, such that you'd be more concerned you may have developed advanced heart disease before 40. But I would probably myself get it then and then probably every 5 years, just because I just think it's such a powerful test.
I just was thinking how, if you have family members that passed away, like my dad, for example, passed away last summer and he had heart disease, but 10 years ago he had heart attack, but I always found it was more possibly stress related. Of course, they don't always look at insulin and other inflammatory markers and really look at the why. But if you have had family members that have passed away from heart disease, would you, if there's a lot of it lifestyle behavior, but how do you know if it's more genetics and epigenetics? And should you just do this test anyways because your father or grandfather passed away or mother, whoever, of heart disease?
Yeah.
Take ownership.
Family history of heart disease is very relevant. I myself have technically, I say technically, you'll see why in a moment. Technically, I have family that have family history of heart disease. The catch is that I do have lots of people who've lived very long. All of the ones who've lived very long, it's a perfect score. All of the ones who've lived very long didn't smoke or drink. All of the ones who died earlier of heart disease or stroke, smoke and or drank, a lot of them both. And so we kind of have a little bit of an A/B test within our own lineage. And let me just state once again, in case you never get this enough times, don't smoke. Smoking is really, really bad on the heart and lots of other things, but especially the heart. And try to limit drinking from getting too out of control.
That's funny. My client, we're always talking about people in Italy or other Europe, they can have wine every night and have drink. And he always says, how come they can drink all day long? Go to lunch, they have wine, go to dinner, you have wine. And then, over here, North America, people drink and they have more health issues with alcohol. It's just,
I know my opinion, having been there many times, both with food and with alcohol, they're they are not bingers. So if they're consuming, I mean, it's very food culture specific. They tend to consume, like, a meal itself will tend to be a longer span of time, whereas we're more likely wolfing things down quickly.
I would say that.
And
Yes.
same thing with alcohol. Like if they open a bottle at a table, it's that bottle for like a long time, like a very long time, while people are chatting and relaxing and chilling out. And that seems to be the same thing with even smoking, from what I've seen. It's interesting because you really can't see the contrast in that over in Europe, they're taking their time more. I think it's a broad generalization, but generally they seem to be just taking their time more with things related to leisure. And they kind of think of meals as more leisure, not something you're injecting in the middle of a very busy day. And I think that's very relevant to the health outcomes of how you're treating the things you put into your body.
I know. I always make fun of but just compare how Europeans eat at lunchtime, and we go there, you have to ask to get the bills. All right, I'm done. Half an hour, I want to go on with my day. And then you have to say, I want to leave, versus, the locals are sitting there for about 3 hours having a conversation over a meal. And us Americans eat so fast and inhale it and move on and stressed out all the time. So no wonder why we have more issues.
I would notice several times when walking around the city, like I would loop back and then go by another diner that we had seen from like 2 hours earlier and still see a lot of the same people sitting in like because a lot of these are outdoor seating areas.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more thing too, which is just that also in going just about everywhere, there's so much more public transit that requires much more footwork. You're on your feet a lot more in these other countries than we are, where we're getting in our car in the garage and then getting to the work and then stepping out to go into the office. Whereas often just to transverse these, everybody's walking a lot more. If they're getting on the tube in London, if they're getting into public transport in France, whatever, it's just built into the day that you're going to be moving a lot more just in day-to-day life. And I think that's also really healthy.
Yeah. I used to always sell that point to clients when they want to do a half marathon, or I can't do one. I go, when you're in Europe, how many miles did you walk a day walking? He does walk a lot more. You usually do 8 miles walking. So going back to nutrition, and with a lot of people doing, like Dr. Ken Berry, we're talking on the cruise, the more of a butter, bacon, eggs. I'm missing the beef, meat diet now.
Beef, butter, bacon, eggs.
Yeah, the BBB and E, and plus the smash, the anchovy, sardines, and getting the fatty fish. So a lot of people it seems that's suddenly really popular right now, is the thing people are experimenting with. Have you listened or paying attention to anybody's research afraid of, they're going to have high cholesterol and get heart disease, and they're doing their labs? Are you seeing more on that? And then we'll get into the lab testing itself. But what are you observing in that field, or new diet?
Well, definitely
plan.
What you just described is an extremely low glycemic diet. I'm right now, I'm on what I call the baseline diet. I call it the baseline diet because I do it for a lot of experiments, and it's just 3 ingredients. It's all beef hot dogs, hard-boiled eggs, and Colby Jack cheese. And part of what is kind of nice, I guess you could say, when you're trying to do some kind of reset with your diet, is to break things down to such minimal number of categories and to like particular food types, because I think a lot of our difficulty is in, like, you're going into something like keto, and now there's a huge selection of different keto products. There's all these recipes, that kind of thing. There's actually a kind of comfort that can come from just being like, for a span of time, I'm going to have just these foods, and that'll make my life easier. And then I don't have to think that much about the foods I'm going to have outside of this. So I can understand why that becomes a lot more popular. Now, to the thing that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, yes, I think if it's very low glycemic, if you're very low carb, and again, if you're lean and metabolically healthy, and especially if you're more cardiocentric, I do think your cholesterol levels will go up. But to expand on what I said before, I don't believe that the cholesterol being seen in your blood is reflective of what you're consuming. In fact, most of the cholesterol that you have in your diet is in the form of something called cholesterol esters. What that means is that the cholesterol molecule is actually attached to free fatty acids that make it bulkier. So most of that actually passes through you. A lot of people don't realize that. You absorb more of the free cholesterol, which is to say it's not attached. It literally is the molecule all by itself. The vast majority of the cholesterol that's in your body right now, your body made. It was mostly produced at the liver. And that's kind of an important component to bear in mind. Now, it's true, as you consume more foods that have free cholesterol, you will absorb more. And then interestingly, your liver will produce less as a result. It'll compensate differently. Conversely, if you consume no cholesterol, if you're on a plant-centric diet, your liver will produce more cholesterol to try to compensate for that. But on a plant-centric diet, you also have more fiber, and therefore we get back to the demand, bringing down the total traffic that's found in the bloodstream. But that said, I have yet to find any research that shows if you've got low levels of cholesterol because you're just failing to launch them into the circulation in the first place, that it comes along with good outcomes. So folks with something called A-beta lipoproteinemia or familial hypo-beta-lipoproteinemia, again, I know those are mouthfuls, but they're basically folks. Yeah, they're folks who don't launch those complexes into the bloodstream in the first place. Like if you have a problem making ApoB lipoproteins to comprise these complexes such that they enter the bloodstream, you end up with a lot of issues. For example, you'll need to megadose fat soluble vitamins because that gets trafficked, CoQ10, which is another important antioxidant. But on top of that, folks who have these diseases, they tend to have stunted growth. They tend to have failure to thrive. They tend to have, how I mentioned the central nervous system, it tends to be very cholesterol rich. Well, they tend to have a lot of neurological issues, which I believe is in part because they're not getting enough supply out of cholesterol in the form of lipoproteins to like astrocytes and so forth. Now, again, all hypotheses, but regardless, the LDL that's in your bloodstream at any given time is a reflection of both what's incoming and what's outgoing. So are there studies that instead show that folks who have more that's outgoing being taken up at a faster rate, such as through cholesterol-lowering medication, who have lower LDL, do they tend to do better? Yes. But I think that's because they're still getting into circulation. Those lipoproteins are at least getting into circulation so that cells that would want them on demand can have access to them. So getting back to what you just mentioned with these specialty diets that are kind of like multiple removal diets that are low glycemic, I would expect cholesterol to be getting higher. How much that's detrimental or not detrimental at all? Well, that's what our study will hopefully help us find out.
What's the Goldilocks effect of everything we say? Not too high, not too low. What's the optimal amount that creates health, I guess, metabolic health in a positive way? Live longer, live your best life.
because
don't know what you don't know.
I think, because again, I think that's more, I think the standing levels of LDL are more a consequence than a cause. And so let me put it this way. I think it's much, much more likely that we're going to continue to find that HDL being high and triglycerides being low are just far more relevant, not just to cardiovascular disease, but to a host of other diseases related to metabolic health. So I do love a lipid panel, even if it turns out that LDL is less relevant than we all thought, because of it also showing HDL and triglycerides, which, as some might call it, a poor man's proxy for hyperinsulinemia. Odds are if you have high levels of standing insulin levels, you probably will have a low HDL and a high triglyceride. Because again, you probably are back to that point where you've got a parking problem. And that's resulting in more effort on the body to try to park things, which usually results in more insulin.
They look at the HDL being really high. I remember when I started keto, I don't know, 15 years ago, I remember my HDL was super high and they're like, oh, your HDL is too high. You're eating too much fat. But it's not just
that's another association. And oftentimes the studies that show that high HDL associates with worse outcomes, especially all-cause mortality, is they need to stratify for alcoholism. Alcoholism can result in extraordinarily high levels of HDL. Mm. And there's a period of time where HDL can be high and triglycerides can still be low before a lot more of the ectopic fat sets in. But once that happens, then both HDL can be high and triglycerides can be high. So until we have studies like ours at UCLA, I'm not sure, but I think our average LDL is in the 90s for our group. But I know many folks who have HDL in the low hundreds and even some in the mid hundreds, like say 150 or 160. But that follows our published energy model because HDL cholesterol, we posit, is downstream of the turnover of those initial lipoproteins, the ApoB containing lipoproteins. So as they're releasing more and more, as these things shrink at this level, they have to shed phospholipids and free cholesterol, which are part of their shell. So as they're getting smaller, they're kind of making a mess. Mm-hmm. And that mess, especially the phospholipids and free cholesterol, are being picked up by the HDL. You know how I said LDL particles, or rather, I should say ApoB containing lipoproteins, they start big with cargo and then get small. Mm-hmm. Well, conversely, HDL starts small and gets big. And it's supposed to because it mops up, if you will, the leftover lipids that are coming from this process of releasing those initial cargo. So when they do, they get bigger and bigger. Well, necessarily then, if you were trafficking more on these ApoB containing lipoproteins, if there's more of these coming into circulation, more of them getting turned over, we would expect that there would be higher HDL. That's part of what helped connect the model, is now it could make more sense. I'm sure you'll find many clients that if they take on more carbohydrates, they'll see their LDL go down, but likewise, we'll see their HDL go down. It may still even be high if they're metabolically healthy, but I think it's an indication of turnover when all else is kept equal.
So much to track. So, well, I want to get to owning our labs, looking at lab testing, which ones to get and track, but the exercise, stress, sleep, fasting, all these different factors, can you, I guess in your study, track any of that, or heart rate variability? I mean, there's so much you have to stay out of and keep specific, but with cholesterol and eating a higher fat, low carb diet, just with the impact or influence of any consistent exercises, endurance or HIIT training be interesting. And then levels of stress, measuring their HRV, and then measuring their quality of sleep, deep sleep and REM. There's so many things to rabbit hole down.
Oh, look, I want to study all of them, but yeah, budgets and control, particularly in free living people over a year. No question. If somebody out there who's listening to this, wants to throw us a few $1 million, I'd love to put everyone on Oura rings. I'd love to have persistent CGMs on all the participants. I would love to gather as much of this is something I've talked about before, and I'll just say again, I think if we could just get even 1,000 people to just be high frequency testers, so they would live their normal life, but effectively they have what might be considered a part-time job of just being highly studied all the time. So they're getting blood work constantly. They have all sorts of wearables on, and they're carefully logging all the food they're consuming, as well as taking regular metrics like their weight and composition, scaling, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I think so much amazing data could come out of just doing that, and they would kind of serve as a matched control for so many other studies, because you're getting such a wide spectrum of markers in composition to each other. So we'd see all kinds of patterns we don't see now, because so many of these studies, they do require a lot of work just to get a small amount of the different things. Why not just spend literally millions and millions for just a small group of people that are testing across all of these metrics at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
So when you were listing off these different things, I was like, yeah, I want that too. Yes, I want that also.
I know, because it's always, yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, but that's the problem is so often you get to the ends of these data sets after you've spent years putting them together and you're like, oh, only we could somehow get this other piece of information. Now, the good news is we are banking blood from this study. So we will have some amount of frozen samples that can be used for other assays after the fact. That said, it doesn't pick up the things you were mentioning that we would get from things like wearables. I'd love to know sleep quality of the lean mass hyperresponder group. I'd love to know total steps per day. I'd love to know resistance versus cardio training in their day-to-day life. I'd love to know all of that.
I wonder how I can do that. Because that's what I do when I'm coaching people. I collect ideally all that data and analyze it and get their lab testing. And then I'm trying to pitch this to naturopath doctors, functional medicine people who want to make a difference in their client, that they need to do this accountability add-on service for their clients instead of let's come back in 6 months and do these labs again, follow these recommendations, but have someone as myself and other coaches, practitioners to help be that liaison to help be accountable. And let's track all this data and input it into Practice Better or Heads Up Health or Training Peaks, whatever, and track it all because it's so much information, get feedback. So anyways, but let's finish up. We got a couple of minutes on your lab testing. How do people get started in testing and talk about your service website?
So ownyourlabs.com is the platform that we're doing it through. And as you mentioned before, we also have a number of bundles that are related to specific things. Like we have a heart health bundle, we have a citizen science bundle, but we also have a basics bundle, the things that we consider to be most relevant. For example, beyond CBC and CMP, which you might be getting with your typical doctor, we like fasting insulin. And we also like C-reactive protein, which, is a fantastic inflammatory marker. Both of those are not as commonly ordered as you might think. And of course, lipids are of special interest for us. But yeah, the whole point of Own Your Labs is there's more and more doctors that are moving to concierge service. So we want to help them to be able to just send their patient, because a lot of times they'll tell their patients, just go and get your own blood work, but also to empower patients themselves who are like, well, I want to get fasting insulin, but I can't get my doctor to order it.
Yeah. So
can I just get it, privately for myself and then be encouraged by us to take it to their doctor, but that it's ultimately, their choice. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the whole point. Now, there's another aspect to this. Part of what incentivized us was that I also wanted to use the opportunity to incentivize the user at the end at checkout to allow for submitting their anonymized data to a data archive that we would make available for citizen research. So both formal and citizen scientists alike can do further research for those folks, like we've been talking about through this podcast, for which there's not a lot of data on. So being able to also have that blood work automatically added in, but then anonymized where their first, last name, date of birth, location, all that stuff is taken out. So it's just the direct demographic metrics along with the blood work helps. That way people can also help with citizen science overall, which is a key goal of ours. So I love that you can do both. You can both get your private blood work, but you can also kind of help out the community.
Amazing. I know. We'll put everything in the show notes and add some things in the intro that I forgot. But I find that insulin is a frustrating one because I went to my doctor last year, new doctor, and I ask all my clients, ask for insulin, take this list of labs to your doctor, get covered by insurance. And it's shocking how they won't do that. And my doctor said, well, you don't have anyone that died of type 2 diabetes in your family. So I'm like, this is supposed to be preventative. Are you really telling me you're going to wait till I have diabetes so you can start testing me that I actually have it? It just blows me away. And ever since then, come on, people, I can go to Ulta Labs or your website and order it for $20 or whatever it is to get your own and be preventative. Isn't that the goal of going to your doctor is be preventative to not go there when I'm really sick and have all these issues, but no, we're supposed to just wait till we're sick. Amazing.
Yeah, it's insulin in particular is a stunner for me because Joseph Kraft was showing this 50 freaking years ago. He's doing this work in like the 70s, and he shows how predictive it is towards type 2 diabetes. I mean, it's such a powerful metric, and it absolutely is a leading indicator by not just years, but possibly even decades, depending on your status. I think that every basic panel, period, should have both insulin and C-reactive protein, because both of them are at least something you can rule in or out the next full category to investigate further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I know. All right. So you've got a lot of seminars you're speaking at. I know you're going to be here in San Diego, right? You're coming to Low Carb in August. But you got next weekend's Hard to Kill Summit and Keto Orlando Summit, the Metabolic Health Summit. You're like all over the place. So
I am. And it's funny because I also need to work on this upcoming prelim paper at the same time somehow. And we're shooting a documentary. There's a documentary that's getting shot around this whole story, which I'm going to be pretty excited about. It should get, wrapped early next year, and then maybe a release by December of next year. So still a ways off, but it'll be an interesting story to watch. That's for sure. Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we'll let you go eat your Colby cheese and hot dog wieners. And what else is there? Is that it? You're just eating Colby
hard-boiled
cheese?
Eggs.
Hard-boiled egg. Yeah. Is it better soft boiled or you're doing hard boiled? Does that matter?
No, they're all hard boiled just in case. I mean, the whole purpose of this baseline diet was that it's portable. So I could theoretically go to conferences, but still ensure that I ate the same thing wherever I was at because they're common brands.
Yeah.
But the hard boiled, that's part of why it needed to be hard boiled. I don't even have it in a different form because there could be a confounder there in having hard boiled versus soft boiled. I'd rather just rule out that being a possibility.
Yeah. That could get confusing.
That's why it's always in the same way. That's why it's called the baseline diet.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy. Well, we'll see you next month. I will be at the Low Carb USA conference. I'll swing by, say hi. Thanks for all your information.
And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Keep doing what you're doing, but make sure you have time to recover and repair and take care of yourself.
Working on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, my fellow aging endurance athletes, just a reminder, if you like what you listened to today, make sure to share this episode with your community. Head to debbiepotts.net to set up a free discovery call to learn more about my personalized coaching programs, especially if you are on a mission as myself to improve the aging process and start training to be my best self when I am 80, 90 years old. So I am on a mission to live my best life and be my best self the second half of my life. So if you're on the same mission as me, head over to my website and YouTube channel to learn more ways to improve the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.